Hey everyone, hope all is well. My name is Myles Dyer and welcome to the Quest for Global Empathy. Thank you so much for all the support you've been showing so far. I'm excited to announce that we are now on Spotify, so whether you listen to podcasts there, on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or like to watch the video version on YouTube, you can just search Quest for Empathy on any of these platforms. Just click the subscribe/follow button and give it a rating where possible, and just keep spreading the word because this is a real grassroots effort. Speaking of which, we've now had these shirts finally come through, which are the Founding Supporter limited edition shirts for the Quest for Global Empathy. And there are only 100 of these for people that wish to become a Founding Supporter. If you want one, go to patreon.com/Myles Dyer. It's $10 a month, and after being a supporter for 2 months, you'll then have one sent out to you. They're really cool. It's a great way to say that you were here first, supporting the show from its early beginnings, and I just can't wait to see where this keeps going. We've got so many great guests lined up, including one today, TV presenter and trainee psychotherapist. It's Melinda Messenger. Thanks for coming down.
That's quite all right. Thank you for inviting me in.
Of course. I'm going to start this conversation with quite a shallow topic, which is your name.
Okay.
It is your real name.
It is my real name.
The reason I ask that is because Melinda Messenger is a really good, you've probably heard this before, it's a good public figure name to have.
Apparently so. I mean, when
the double M, the M-E.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you can't. It's really hard to see anything about yourself that objectively, isn't it? Because of course I have grown up with that name, and and I didn't really want to be called Melinda when I was little. I kind of wanted to have a more ordinary name because I was the only one that was Melinda. And then Messenger. So I don't know. I'm just, yes, it is my real name. Is it a good name? Who knows? I can't really see it in that way.
So it's never crossed your mind that it was a good. Because you know, some people in public figures do get name changes. Because I've been told that Myles Dyer is a good public figure name in the sense of you got the double Y, you got the Y in Myles and the Y in. And I don't know if there's a rule book that agencies have and stuff like that, but there are a lot of people who do. Some of them do change the name because of, you know, for privacy issues, but others do it because they want something that's a bit more.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on how you view it. If you're trying to create something, if you're trying to create an image or an idea about yourself, then something like your name is going to be part of that package, isn't it? Whereas I just sort of accidentally fell into the world that I fell into of kind of media and fame without any sort of plan or design. So yeah, that it didn't cross my mind, and it's only sort of retrospectively over the years that people have said, "Oh, yeah, it's a really good name," but it's not something that particularly registers for me because why would it?
True. Know? Yeah. No, I agree with that. And also when I think of like,
also when I was at school, Messenger used to get shortened to Messy. So
okay, well, that was going to be my follow-up question of nicknames. Messy. Okay. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, I just got called Dyer and curly locks and that because I had really, really curly hair as a kid and stuff like that, but nothing with my name. And the problem with a name like Dyer is I don't think I could have ever become a doctor. Like, I don't know if there are like Dr. surgeons. If there's a surgeon. Maybe there is, and not to discriminate, I'm sure there's lots of great doctors called Dyer out there, but I was just straight away going, there must be some collisions.
There must be, mustn't there? There must be. But it did all right for Danny, didn't it?
That's true.
It worked there.
Do you know that's one of the most common questions I get asked is if I'm related to Danny Dyer? And at first I thought it was a joke, but it's a genuine question.
It's a genuine question. And are you?
Well, funnily enough, and I don't know the guy personally, of course, when I first got asked that, I didn't take it as a positive thing. But now I do see it as a positive thing because he's been on this massive journey, and I think he's really made a good name for himself. Because when he first started, he was all into being the hard man and conspiracy theorist shows. I missed
all of that.
Did
part.
You?
Yeah, I'm kind of quite late to the party on that one. So, but he seems like a decent guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems like he's not afraid to be himself, and I think that's the quality I really like. I think that's, what's the point in trying to be anything but you?
Sure. And Before we talk today, although I've always known a lot about you, I did have a look at all the different things you've done, and you've done so many different types of jobs. Like, was this true? You worked for an airline as your first job?
Not as my first job, no. So, I mean, how far back do we want to go? I had a Saturday job in a card shop.
A card shop?
In a card shop, yeah, stacking cards, vacuuming at the end of the day. The co-op. And then
We've all done that. My first one was John Lewis in Reading, actually, selling carpets.
Yes, you've got to do that kind of work, haven't you?
And you have so much more respect and empathy for people, because when you meet those customers that are horrible to you, you're like, I'm never going to... I mean, there's some people that might do that and go, okay, I'm going to give them hell.
Yeah,
but no, I've always been the other way of...
Generally, it sort of breeds a little more understanding, doesn't it? Yeah. Then I went on to work in an office. I was a customer services manager. Ended up looking after lots of different clients, had a team of about 50 people. And then I thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. And went to work as cabin crew for an airline. Did that for a little while, which I think the training was amazing. Loved the training.
That was okay. So training, I can imagine, is really interesting.
It is.
But do you learn any secrets that the public don't like to know about?
Yes.
About why you should put your head down forward so your teeth land in your lap if you crash.
Oh my God, there's so many things. They basically take you through this training where it's like, okay, so in this scenario, the chances of survival are pretty slim. But yeah, I mean, the whole thing about the brace position is actually that really, it does save your life. It stops your legs from getting broken, basically. So at least you can leave the plane,
right? Which
is an advantage.
I didn't know it was for legs.
Yes, to protect your legs. So your legs have got to go right under, and obviously you want to protect your head.
Yeah.
You learn, which I'm not going to say because I don't want to freak poor travellers out, but you learn the sort of coding of the bell system. So when you hear a certain number, you know that means something's gone wrong.
And did you ever have any scary moments on a plane?
No, I mean, we had a few flights. Again, I better be careful what I say, hadn't I? Had a few flights when we were lucky to have an empty aircraft and it was just the crew. And then, you got to do a few fun things like
that's awesome.
Experiencing a little bit of zero gravity. But
fortunately,
fortunately, well, I say fortunately, I kind of this is terrible, isn't it? But I found it quite boring. I loved the people. I loved serving people. But it was a little bit mundane. It's not quite what you imagine it would be. So it is like waitressing effectively.
Sure.
And you don't really get to see the country so much.
Did you get to travel to a lot of places though?
I did. But then it's a very quick turnaround. So you kind of, you're in and you're out. And I did. Terrible, but I did used to think, oh God, wouldn't it be fun if something dramatic happened? And then I thought maybe I shouldn't do this job. Yeah.
But it's good that you got on well with the people, because I've always found when it comes to working in life anywhere, the people are what make it good. Because I've worked at some jobs that I would hate at face value. Like I worked as a labourer when I just needed to pay the bills, and it's just totally not my sort of thing. But the people I worked with were great. And then on the flip side, I've worked for some jobs I would love, and the people made my life hell, and I just wanted out. It really is about the people and the teams that you work with.
It's completely about that. Everything else, is sort of irrelevant, really, isn't it? It's all about the kind of interpersonal relationships and the kind of value. And you can do anything. You can dig holes all day and just get a tremendous amount of meaning and satisfaction out of that work, just as you can doing something that people might think is kind of uber amazing and glamorous. It's who you're around just brings, it brings a quality to life that is totally valuable. It's priceless.
And it's the fact that you spend most of your hours of your life with people you work with more than family in a lot of cases, which is always surreal to think about.
It is. Yeah, it's huge, isn't it? Yeah, when you think about, that's something that I've always thought a lot about, is how do I spend my time and what do I want to spend my time doing, because my time is my life, and I'm not going to get that back. It's the one resource it's going to run out. So I want to spend it wisely, and sometimes I've done that, sometimes I haven't, but now I feel like where my life is it's I'm definitely sort of more consciously going down that road of choosing where I want to put my energy and how I want to spend my life, because who knows when we're going to die? It could be just like that. So I don't want to waste it.
And so now you're doing psychotherapy.
So transpersonal psychotherapy, which
and this, what is transpersonal?
So transpersonal sort of refers to the aspect of ourself that's sort of greater than the kind of physical material, so what we see here. So it's like the transcendental part of self. So for some people you might call that soul, you might call it your true self, spirit. It's that which is above and beyond us. So in psychotherapy, we look at the person that's in front of us, we understand their dynamics, what's going on for them, but through the transpersonal lens you can also see that there's more. So, you know, there will be the natural human that before the conditioning, before, you know, life happens,
right,
that's kind of still intact under all the layers. And through various sort of different methods and lenses, you're able to kind of make contact there, I guess, and sort of draw forth those qualities, which sort of peels away the layers that we've kind of covered ourselves up with over the years.
So it's the more innate characteristics of who we are.
It's the more innate characteristics, yeah. And it's very much, it's sort of, it doesn't really pathologise. So if something isn't going right in someone's life, you're able to, through that lens, see where the distortions are and understand that they're distortions, which then can be worked with and sort of turned around so that then they work in favour of that person. So they can become more fully who they're meant to be, which in turn leads to living life in a way that you truly want to live it. And therefore you get meaning, you get joy, you get contentment, you get peace. So yeah, essentially that's what it's about.
And I'm sure it wasn't one particular moment in time, but what has led you in that direction of that interest and wanting to, because you've always come across as a very much a people's person anyway, but then there are a lot of people in life that, if that's the term we can use, who then don't sort of take it to that extent.
Yeah, I guess it's something that's always been a calling for me. When I was younger, I remember sort of around the age of 6, 7, I was always really curious about people being human, being alive. You know, even at a very young age, I can remember sort of sitting there thinking, you know, what is God? Why are we born? You know, why do some people kill animals? What's eternity? You know, what happens when we die? And so I was always very intrigued at the sort of deeper layers of life, and always followed my own sort of quirky spiritual path, if you like, that I never really talked about and kept kind of very sort of private. But it just meant that I was always looking at the sort of deeper layers of who we were. And always sort of sensed this connection with people, but just assumed that everybody did, and that was just a normal way of living. And then you kind of realise through life's sort of journeying that not everybody is that way. And then my own sort of personal experiences through childhood, coming up against adversity, coming up against difficult times, coming up against my own inner conflicts and my own inner crisis and my own inner, you know, God, why am I here? What is life about? Why am I experiencing this? All of those things sort of, I guess, pushed me along that path. And then I decided that actually I keep having this calling back to doing this sort of work, the psychotherapeutic work, and I found a path that really suited me because it was transpersonal. So that meant it covered the sort of spiritual element as well as the sort of psychological, physical.
That's really interesting. So something I've been talking a lot to people about recently is compassion-focused therapy, which is something I went through the past year to deal with a lot of underlying issues. It's a lot like cognitive behavioural therapy, but it's a lot more of the emotional side, and it's all to do with compassion for yourself. And I mentioned this on a previous episode, so I won't go into too much detail here. And Paul Gilbert, the founder of it, he's actually going to be coming on at a future show, which I'm really looking forward to. But it's the idea that it's very easy to be compassionate to other people. Well, not always. There might be people that wrong you. And so it's the idea that compassion requires courage to be compassionate to those that don't bring positivity into your life. And therefore actually being compassionate to yourself is the toughest calling, because we're always critical. And I always thought, okay, I'm a bit critical of myself. I didn't realise how damaging it had been to me, and it had impacts with me in relationships, and it had opened up all these things I hadn't really considered before. But the reason I really liked it more than, I mean, cognitive behavioural therapy is involved in it, but the reason this particular therapist had changed me a lot was because it's I find with like cognitive behavioural therapy and regular counselling, it can be quite cold and calculative. in terms of like, this is the mythology, this is the potential
it does
things.
very much with the sort of surface level,
Yes,
doesn't it? It doesn't get into the heart.
Exactly. Whereas there was mindfulness meditation, and it's a lot more of a feely thing, and I think that you have a much more human interaction with your therapist. Funnily enough, I experienced something which I didn't realise how much of a thing it was until I looked it up. Transference.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, watching or listening to this, is when you basically have feelings for your therapist.
Yes,
Partly.
Yes. So that's what we call erotic transference. Clues in the title.
Yeah, I wouldn't have used it like that.
Yeah.
But
Well, no, but the erotic actually, it's not. It's really normal, and it happens a lot, and it's beyond just. I mean, that sounds like it's just
exactly,
sexual.
and it's
beyond
not.
the sexual.
It's not just sexual. Yeah.
No, it's not. Because it's actually about that kind of attachment. There can be that sort of sense of falling in love. And when you look at the roots of those, you know, they're really pure, healthy roots, actually, because that's all about connecting. That's all about, and all the process of healing comes via love. I mean, that is the healing field, is the field of love. And so if that's absent, you can maybe get a few things cognitively, so you can understand it logically, but on a sort of a physiological, embodied level, you're not going to receive it in the same way unless you're in that sort of field of love. And so it's really not a bad thing to experience that. It actually shows that a connection and an attachment was made, and that's where like two people really truly meet, and then really good work can be done around that. The key is always to be very honest about what's happening and very conscious, so that you don't misunderstand, or you don't go down pathways that lead to further confusion. So if you can name it and you can talk about it, you get even deeper within yourself, which is powerful.
That is so true, and it's because a therapist offers a lot of the characteristics that are in a successful relationship. So it's openness, it's emotional maturity, it's all these components that people want, as you say, with connectivity and love, which is a healing process. And my concern when I first experienced it was, I do not want to jeopardize, because this therapist was doing wonders for me. And so I did all this research. I looked at a lot of YouTube videos of therapists talking about it, and it was all saying, tell them. And so after one session, I sent her a really long email, and I just said, I've done all this research. It was like an essay. Could have been a paper. Could have submitted it. And I said, I want us to work through this. So we met up, and I wasn't nervous about it at all. And funnily enough, she asked me during it if I was nervous before, and I was like, no, because we've always been very matter of fact with each other, and we have that maturity. And she mentioned that she was a bit nervous, which I thought I really respected.
It's all about honesty.
Yeah.
And the vital thing about the therapeutic process is you work with absolutely everything. So everything in the room. So if you can bring it, it's powerful, it has meaning, it has significance. And without going into your instance, you talk about it sort of setting up what feels like the ideal relationship, and essentially it does, and and that ideal relationship goes back as far as parenting. So you know, it's the ideal. You can become the good mother, you can become the good father, because it's the acceptance of every aspect of yourself. There's no denial of everything, and that's what leads to wholeness. You know, it's only when we sort of deny bits of ourselves or push them out that then we have issues, because we've lost something vital in that part. So yeah, you work with everything in the room. So it's brilliant that you were able to say it, and then I'm sure you probably got a great deal more from being able to have that level of honesty and working through what it meant.
Absolutely, and we were able to continue. She told me that in previous occurrences she's had to refer them, but she said, like, I'm committed to working through this with you, and I really respected it. And there was something in the back of my mind going, because when you're going through those emotions, you're like, I'm sure it is transference, but it does feel kind of real. Like, and you kind of, well, it is real, but you don't want to. I was wondering if it was ever going to be something I'd work through, and by the end of it, I had, and I feel content. And contentness is such an important thing. Like, I was worried it was going to become an infatuation, and it was going to go out of control. And I was like, but you know, we would. Another specific example was one of the exercises I was given one week was to force myself to experience certain emotions by watching certain films and that. And I joked going, oh, I know how to make myself feeling depressed. There's a movie that people keep recommending to me whilst at the same time going, actually, Myles, you probably shouldn't. And she was like, oh, what movie's that? And I was like, Requiem of a Dream. Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, my God. It's with Jared Leto, and it is one of the most depressing movies of all time. So it's a weird one to recommend. It's really powerful.
But you wanted to get in contact with that feeling.
Yeah, I did. And so she then said, it's quite similar to my favourite movie. And in my head, I went, please don't say it. And she went, Donnie Darko, which is my favourite movie. And so instances like that, you're like, this is really annoying me. Like, it's great. It's just, but it was like this cliche. I found it like a laughable moment. But the idea of connectiveness with other people, I think, is an interesting one, because at the end of the day, we are all just human beings walking in and out of rooms. The context may change, but the feelings are real. And
the feelings are real, and the connectedness is everything. Connectedness is what keeps us all alive. It's that whole idea, isn't it, that you can't live in isolation. We are all connected, even if we don't want to be, and we can be as defended as we like to sort of try and protect that isolation, but we're all connected, as we are to everything within nature, as we are to the earth. It's funny how sort of simple and obvious it is, yet how we can so miss that.
And I think it's easy to miss these days with the fact that we are now living in these concrete jungles. We're completely disconnected from nature unless we seek it. And I think it makes us lose at the heart of what it is to be human, and to realise that there is this symbiosis. We are nature. It's not just human. People think it's about like we've got to dip our toes in with nature. It's like, no, we are nature.
And this is what really kind of like amazes me is, when did it happen that we stopped seeing ourselves as part of nature, or these things that were just sort of plonked on top of something that was, I don't know, a resource there for our use? No, I mean, of course we're part of nature. How could we be anything but part of nature? We're born, from this planet into this planet. We die on this planet. We don't live without it.
Yes.
It's like we're so intrinsically part of nature, yet we somehow have an idea of ourselves as human beings as being something separate or separate from. And I think that probably comes down to where we split off from our essential true nature in ourselves, and we become this sort of ego identity that sort of lives in our head and isn't in our bodies anymore. And it's all about our concepts and our ideas. And from that place, nature is going to seem really alien, and also we're very able to use and abuse it. But the minute you kind of come back from there, or come out of there, and have that realization of what it is to be human and what a human means, and to sort of occupy that space, then you can no longer sort of live behind that illusion. And I think that's what happens. And I think we seem to be in a time where that is being really challenged, and things are changing, and it's sort of structurally everything is changing, and people are starting to sort of wake up to that within themselves.
Yeah, we have sort of sleepwalked into complacency with it, because I think the ego that has allowed human beings to build themselves out of nature for good reasons. We've had the Industrial Revolution, the Digital Revolution, we've got the fourth wave now coming with AI. These are all brilliant things that can transform the world for the better. But unfortunately, a lot of those bad components around competition and about hoarding possessions and, wealth being associated with status, not the value of the ideas. It's all about the person that managed to get the patent on the idea and then sell it. I think that is where the challenge is coming in now. People are sort of rethinking about the system, and people often talk about it, capitalism versus socialism. I think it's far more complicated than that. I mean, for me, this is even quite simplistic. I'm all about a mixed economy at the moment, but for me, I look way beyond that at the ideas of things like a resource-based economy, the idea that we need to look away from the monetary system that has got us up to this point. And when people go, but capitalism has done better than every system before us, it's like, but then what's not to say that there's a new system that we're approaching with technology?
Absolutely. And I think that whatever we see out in society is just merely a reflection of where we are collectively in our own evolution. So, where we've got the sort of ego structure that's to say sort of disconnected from the real embodied human that we are. So it's all about hoarding, control, it operates from a place of lack, and therefore I must always need more. That kind of like, I'm always going to need more money. I'm always going to need more, stuff to kind of shore up its identity so that it doesn't collapse. But it's a fake part of us. I mean, it's a necessary part of us. It's a construct that we need to a degree, but without contact with the truer part of ourselves, it runs amok, creates chaos, create these systems that don't work. And as we're evolving, as human beings evolving, I think you're right, we're going to evolve into a new place. And so it might not be, we can't necessarily foresee what it is, because it's new, and it may be beyond the realms of the majority's comprehension at the moment. So we can look back at what we've done, but we can't necessarily see where we're going in the future. But it does feel like there is some kind of evolution going on, and I really do hope that we kind of, and I evolve into that place where it is something like a resource-based economy. And of course, that is going to require, and what comes first? It's the civilization that comes first, isn't it? And it's how we're operating. But that requires us to change significantly and to drop the old ideas, the old ways of being, in order to live in that. Because if a significant number of us haven't done that work and aren't in that place, then of course it's not going to work, because there will still be people operating from the place of lack. And
security comes from a place of keeping things as they are, which is, and so for example, although I have a lot of criticisms for the political establishment and even the media establishment, I don't see people as being bad actors at heart. They are people that are being rewarded for their behaviour. So you can look at the bankers that caused the financial crisis. These are not people that are going, he, I'm going to, screw over the economy. They were people that have been brought up in a world where they are being rewarded for their behaviour. And even in the media, it's called, I think it's called like structural censorship. So it's not that journalists, Sky News, Good Morning Britain, any sort of show you can think of, it is not that I am being employed, so I'm going to change my views to fit the agenda. It is because your views are that and you do fit our agenda, we're going to employ you. And it creates groupthink. And this happens in all media institutions. I worked at The Guardian for 2 years, and even though I worked in marketing, I used to go to morning conference every morning, which were off the record, so I can't go into specifics. But during the 2016 US presidential elections, I was a huge supporter of Bernie Sanders. And most journalists there were for Hillary Clinton and what I would regard as business as usual establishment politics. And I've had a lot of people since then contact me since the election of Trump and now what's happening with Bernie Sanders running again. Because when Hillary Clinton got the nomination, I said in that room and got laughed at, Donald Trump's now won it because she was the establishment candidate and people want change. Now you can have a debate about what is the good type of change. But unfortunately, the masses want to change regardless of what it was and to be noticed. Kind of like with Brexit. It's, as Michael Moore calls it, like a Molotov, an ideological Molotov that is thrown to say, you know what, if we burn the place down, the rich and the elite have to turn on the sprinklers for us all. And that's literally what's happening. Yeah.
I think they are symbolic, aren't they? They are symbolic of change. Yeah, the whole... Trump coming into power, it was really fascinating because it did really reflect, as you say, people wanting something totally different, and to have different aspects, different parts of their voices heard that he reflected. And I think sometimes you do have to have this sort of chaos, the breaking apart. And you see it definitely as part of the sort of therapeutic process. There is a stage where everything has to fall apart, everything has to be broken before you can rebuild anew and rediscover what was hidden under those ruins. So yeah, sometimes it takes something enormous to sort of crack it open, and then that it can grow and it can germinate anew and afresh from there.
Yeah. And
maybe this is what's happening.
Definitely. I was just looking up a quote because on previous episodes I've tried to recall quotes from memory and have always not done them justice.
I can never recall quotes.
Yeah. But Buckminster Fuller famously said, you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
Well, there we go. And that's exactly the same as, and I can never recall quotes either, but to do something new. You can't create new things with the old way of thinking. You have to have a new way of thinking to create something new.
Yeah.
And it's exactly that. And anything that you've got to be careful what it means to fight as well, because when we fight something, when we're in opposition all of the time, basically we give it strength, we give it power, because we're giving it energy, we're giving it attention, we're not really shifting it. If there's like an acceptance, if you work from acceptance, it is what it is. You don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with it, and it doesn't have to be right, but this is what it is. So we accept that. From that place within ourselves, you operate in a different realm of sort of consciousness, or a different realm of thinking, and that's where new ideas can then spring forth. Otherwise, it's just this constant clash. Things need to get united, they need to get integrated, they need to come together so that they can evolve into something new. So again, we individually, have to do that piece of work ourselves, and then we impact the collective, and then when the collective changes, all our structures, everything around us changes, and then that's when we're in a new era. Hey,
no, amen to that. But and going to what you said about resistance and giving it more energy, it's also the fact it's very easy to talk about the things that we don't want.
Yeah.
But then actually the real courage, kind of like with compassion focused therapy, it's the idea of having the courage to say, what do we want that is in the realms of possibility? Because you can set what the goalposts are. And by the way, I'm against, especially with a lot of issues like climate change now, the days of incrementalism are over. So the people that go, the Green New Deal in America, they're trying to bring it in the UK, that is way too radical. Well, the problem is so big, we need solutions big.
We need a radical solution, don't we?
And unfortunately, we're not being benchmarked against economic models anymore, because Bill McKinnon, butchered his name, he said in the States that, when it comes to the environment and nature and Mother Nature does not care about unemployment figures, GDP, budgets, deficit. All it cares about is
all of us, everything done. So
how much carbon is in the atmosphere. Okay, well, this is the consequence, and so we really need.
It needs a radical approach. Absolutely, we've got to. There's no choice now. Nothing else. Everything else is irrelevant, quite frankly. Isn't
but this
it?
This is what scares a lot of people, though, and this is why you see people defending the existing systems. And we'll call everything socialist or communist or, fascist.
I get it. But then, I get it. And I get why people are defending their old systems and wanting to hold them in place, because that's where they feel safe. Outside of that, it's unknown, and that can be really, a terrifying place to go. And they don't necessarily see it, and they have absolutely every right to have their view as I do mine. And it's not about saying one is right, one is wrong, but it's about trying to understand, where they're coming from, trying to understand their perspective, and then finding that place in which both meet, because ultimately two direct oppositions will always meet at some place. They'll always be after the same goal. You just have to keep working until you find that point of integration. But yeah, we've got to have. We can't just sit back and go, all right, then we'll protect our budgets, and we'll just spend this amount of money, and then we have no planet left. But that puts people in fear, doesn't it? It is a very careful line. We have got to wake up. We have got to go, actually, this is serious. I mean, when you've got kids telling you, the house is on fire, you've got to put the fire out. You haven't got time to worry about. But what about the new couch? And shall I go and get those documents? No, you just get the bloody hose and you put the fire out. And whatever you lose in that, well, you have to lose, because the greater good is to stay alive. And and our children are telling us this, and we have got to wake up and listen. But that's not to diminish people's fears, because understand that what happens is people go into fear, and then they go into denial, and then they go into hopelessness, and then we've all had it, quite frankly.
Yeah.
We need everyone just to go, all right, it is real, we do have to do something. Let's not go into those places, but let's just think, what little bit can I do? What little bit of my corner can I tend to make a difference? And if we did that, we'd start to get significant change.
It's about building consensus and bringing people on side. The metaphor I've always used is, if you have two people in different positions, I regard it as like stepping stones on a water. They're right over there, I'm over here. Instead of going, you're in the wrong place, and they're looking around, there's just water,
Theirs is the right place to them.
Well, yeah, and
yours is the right place to you.
And that too. Whereas if you find out where there are stepping stones between you, you can actually say, here is a pathway. Because as you start talking about where we join up, that's actually where you can have a conversation, not just of compromise, but of commonalities and where actually ideologies fit. Because when you go to the root cause of what everyone believes in, it's all about, for the most part, humanity. It's about well-being. People, if you take all the labels away, people do care about the issues.
We all want the same thing ultimately. We just can go about different ways of getting it.
And because we're not getting it, that's what gets us quite tribal, because we feel like, well, we're not fighting strong enough, so we've got to stand in this corner. And that's it. When you were also talking about sort of the people coming head on with disagreements, Brett Weinstein, who's an American biologist and evolutionary theorist, said something on a podcast last year, or maybe the year before, which I thought was really interesting, which is when you look at you have the political sort of thread from, right wing and left wing, but then there's also a north and south pole, which is authoritarian and libertarian. And I think I did it a while ago, and I'm sort of a left libertarian. And again, with labels, there are disagreements I would sort of have with that. But the point that he made that I thought was really interesting was that the left and right have the same values. They just disagree on how to get there. But the left and right authoritarians don't want to have that conversation. And so, there's fascism, a lot of strong right-wing people that's kicking up stuff, and then there's militant left as well, and these are the people that get all the media attention, and then people start getting embedded in their groups. But he says, however, the left libertarian and right libertarian, they disagree on policies and that, but they do share a lot of the same values, and actually they're willing to have that conversation. And his belief, which is what I believe, and I think it gets to things like the resource-based economy and that, is that it's the left and right libertarians that have to acknowledge neither of them have the solution to the current problems, but by coming together we can actually build it. And I find that quite an inspiring...
And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Is that not how it should be? If you take that as a representation, because because we don't want to leave anyone out. If you took it as the individual, you don't leave out any aspect of yourself. We take the collective, which it's the micro and the macro, and we don't want to leave anything out. So everybody's got to be represented. So yes, listen to what both sides want. But you're right. It's through that, the harmonisation of those opposing ideas or those different ideas will create something new, because that's the only thing that can happen when you sort of harmonise two different principles or two different sets of views. Something new will come from that, and it's the something new that hopefully contains both sides and therefore is the whole, which means everybody is getting what they need. What that is, we've yet to discover. We've got ideas. There are ideas out there that I think are wonderful. But until we sort of start that process and realise that the fight is getting us nowhere, the fight against each other is getting us nowhere, then we're not going to progress. It's like you say, we've got to start walking towards one another and finding out, okay, how what have you got going on there? What have we got going on here? What's the goal? And change the outcome, because we've done this forever and it's getting us nowhere. So,
or at least turning people against the systems as opposed to individuals.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, whenever you get extremes, they are going to fight their corner, because they've got so much invested in their ideas. And that's that whole thing again about, the ego will fight to the death to hold its identity. The sort of the true self, which is kind of connected with everybody, sees that it's a part of the whole. So there's nothing to lose. There's no lack. So when you've got groups of people sort of representing those extremes, it is that sort of representation of, we've got to fight to hold this in place, because without it, who are we, or what are we, or they're going to be less than. And so it's a very different approach, but we're in changing times, aren't we? And that, I mean, in a way, it's scary and daunting. I mean, my daughter, she's 15, and she's been passionate about the environment for as long as I can remember. and she's forever saying, I just need to get out of school. I need to get out there. She wants to be a marine biologist. She wants to work in the oceans. And, she's like, but there's going to be nothing left, by the time I get there. And her passion is really palpable, and it does bring it home just how, the time is ticking.
Where did that desire to be a marine biologist come from? And I'm not pointing the fingers at you,
not
but
at me. No, it's completely her. She was just, from a very young age, just acutely aware of what was going on, and just had this sense of, there's a bit of an insanity going on. We are not looking after the world, and I see it in a lot of her age group, and thank goodness for it, and just hopefully they'll kind of gather in momentum and power, and they'll have an influence over the rest of us.
Sure. The last couple of years I've been teaching a lot of 14, 15-year-olds at school, and it's not that I've ever underestimated young people, because I've always felt the out-of-the-box thinking they come with, we can learn a lot from it, because as adults we get it crushed out of us. That's just once you find that job and you start becoming compliant to the system, you can have essences of creativity. I mean, the very nature that you're told for mental health, go away and do something creative, the fact that it's something you have to make an effort to do and it's not implicit. I mean, some people are lucky that they are creative as jobs. I think something can be said there, but as I said, it's not that I've ever underestimated young people, but they always pleasantly surprise you. And 14, 15-year-olds, I was teaching them about, how to detect what fake news is, what emotional manipulation is, how to be safe online. And my part is how to be a creator for change, because it was done with YouTube. So telling them all I've learned about video blogging and how they can campaign. And actually on a few of the assemblies that I did, I would actually mention climate change. And I say, I don't want to burden you with alarm, but this is the reality. This phrase, young people are the future, has never been more apt, because, and I basically said to them, I'm looking for allies, and it's you that are going to have to make this change. And it wasn't kind of like they took that on and clearly went away and did whatever they did. The stuff they came back to me with in that room and afterwards was amazing. Like, they are so engaged and they're just looking for that empowerment. And I, looking around the room, the teachers were nodding as well. And there's this real sense of urgency that I find really, really exciting. But the thing I was going to also ask you about is, with the new sort of work that you're going into now, that's quite a private thing to, be dealing with therapy with individuals, which is a complete contrast to you being on, as a TV presenter, a public figure. How do you square that together? And also in the realms of activism as well, do you feel, sorry, these are two big questions, so we can do them one at a time, which is probably the best way of doing it. But do you feel this activist in you of using your platform, or you do use your platform to get the issues out there?
Definitely. Well, I've been, in the media now for 22 years, something like that. And so for it to have meaning and value to me, I want to use it for something meaningful. So absolutely, if I can use that tiny bit of platform or that tiny bit of light that I've got to share something that's important, then absolutely, because we're all in this together, aren't we? We've all got to work together. We've all got to, whatever position you've been put into, you're that cog in that wheel. You've got to do your job and serve your function and do your role. And so, I'm that cog in that wheel. So when something comes to me that I can share and put out there, then yes, I do. How does that sit alongside the sort of psychotherapy, which is completely personal and private and individual? Well, really nicely, actually, because because that work is all about, it's all about the one-to-one, and that it's something that it's a very deep love and respect I have of that work. So for me, it's a privilege to sit with people and work through whatever the client needs to work through. It's not necessary, and so that's me bringing myself to my work. That's me bringing myself, because without me truly being present there, then we can't effectively work in the way that we need to. So that's one thing. And then I just try and bring myself as fully and as wholly into my media work as well, and try not to see it as a split of like it's that world and it's that world. No, actually it's me. I'm whole, and I bring my whole self to whatever I'm doing. You know, if I'm at home with my kids, all of me is there. You know, if I'm doing the garden, I'm there. If I'm with clients, I'm there. If I'm, you know, doing TV stuff, I'm fully there. If I'm with you, I'm fully here. So you know, you don't have to split yourself. It's just, I guess that's the place I've found myself in life. And I feel like it's a privilege to sort of, you know, it's a small platform, but it's a small platform that I can share certain things, and I'm kind of grateful for that. Have
you ever had clients sort of go, oh my God, it's Melinda Messenger? Because that's honestly a genuine question. It
is. So yes, I've had that. The sort of initial.
Sure.
Oh, you're Melinda Messenger. Are you Melinda Messenger? But of course, who I am is completely irrelevant. You know, that is not what that time is about. That time is solely about the other person and what they need. So that might be a momentary flash of recognition, but it pales into insignificance. It has no significance, because then you are literally, you know, it is the idea of two souls in a room. You know, you're two people, you're two humans, and whatever I do, don't do, it's kind of not relevant to the work.
Yeah. No, I was curious.
So it drifts away. I don't know. And for some people it might be really off-putting. For other people it might not. But what we find is when we work, it's not relevant.
That makes complete sense. And actually a lot of what you say about bringing yourself fully to anything you do is kind of an attitude I've always had. And the irony actually is, although I've worked as a video strategist the last 13 years or 10 years and been on YouTube 13, is a lot of the advice I give people isn't what I take myself, because what I bring to brands is, here is how you build an audience and things like that. Whereas my YouTube channel was always just sort of, this is me. On one day I might do something music related, other times like this. And because there was no real consistency other than me being me, it built a sort of a slower burn of an audience. And actually looking back, I've realised, you know, there were times I did videos that got millions of views, and I realised if I kept doing that, and I consciously made a decision not to because it's just not what I wanted to do. I do look back and realise that I wouldn't have had it any other way, because now when I go to these big YouTube events, funnily enough, a lot of the people on stage are people that grew up watching me. I'm completely like a ghost in the fog in the audience. Like no one really knows who I am now, because it's just young. Like when I organised the first YouTube gathering in the UK, that would have been in 2007. I was 18, 19, 20, and the average age of everyone there was like 25 to 30. And I was like, I've got a bit of growing up to do. I'm now 32, and the average age...
You're still so young.
Oh, yeah. And I feel it. I look a lot younger as well, so hopefully that stays there. But, like, when I go to these events now, it's like 15... At most 15-year-olds. It's just a whole new dynamic. But then when I go backstage, the connections I have are just real. And I think because people always knew I am what you get.
You've been authentically you, haven't you? And whilst that might not, reach the masses, you have more integrity and you have more value, and it will be a far more meaningful. Sure. I mean, we can. I know how it works. If I wanted to sort of be in the papers all the time or be in the press all the time, or I know exactly what I would need to do. But I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to, because I wouldn't get anything from that. So it did
leave me at some points thinking, and it was a video I've wanted to do for a very long time, and I guess talking about it here sort of ticks that off anyway. But it was the idea of, do the ends justify the means? So I used to do a lot of work for UNICEF, which I loved. I used to host a 24-hour live show I created online to raise money for that. And then years later, a lot of my YouTube friends who'd built these huge audiences doing a lot of entertainment were getting flown to all these places to do that charity work. And a bit of me was a bit jealous, like I would have liked to have done it. And so the question crossed my mind, and I had an answer to it now, but just I thought it was an interesting one to explore, which was, should I just for the next year, get my book out of all the guides that I tell other people and just do whatever it takes to build the viewership, and then pivot with that huge audience to then use that audience to do good. And in the end, I decided not to. And once again, I think the benefit I've had is there's plenty of people with large audiences out there doing that kind of activism. My thing has always been about supporting people from behind the scenes, and that's my value. And it's about playing your own role on the battlefield.
Yeah,
and
it's about being your cog in the wheel. Whatever part of the machine we've been put in, we do that job. You know, whatever part of the human body. If you're a white blood cell, you get on and you do your white blood cell job. If you're a part of the heart, you make sure that heart's beating. So we've all got to play our role wherever that is. But also what you'll have is your following will be genuine. You can do that whole thing, build a massive audience, pivot it to get what you want, but then they'll just fall away because they won't be in alignment with what you're saying. They won't get it. They won't be on the same page. People working this way, people grow with you. And it doesn't have to be a vast number to have strength and power. We know that.
Yes.
Small amount of people can do a vast amount of good. And so it's a bit of a myth to think that you need that quantity to affect change. Actually you don't. It's just the committed few.
I've always told people when it comes to activism, if you have one conversation with someone and you bring them on side or inspire them in some way, you've already, if everyone did that, we've doubled inspiration.
Yeah. Look at Mother Teresa, one of the greatest activists ever. Her whole philosophy was just one person at a time. That's it, one person at a time. You just do one bit, and then so on and so on and so forth.
I generally think that is where most of my activism takes place, is at bars and that, because once it would come as no surprise that I loved having deep conversations anyway. So after after a few wines, it just gets to a whole nother level, and global revolution and things like that I talk about, and you see that sort of out of the box moment with people where they start thinking about it, and sometimes they'd rather not think about it, and I'm quite apologetic of giving them trauma.
You've opened Pandora's box.
But then other times people are very grateful for it, and I think that's the way of doing it. Is this is a massive oil tanker we're trying to turn around with civilization, because there are billions of people in the world. There are countries that are at different stages of development. It's going to take a long time. And so I sort of tell people that, if our problem is a boulder and, we all just one at a time give it a little push, if enough of us are giving it that little push, it will get that momentum and roll away. And so I tell people not to be discouraged, because especially for young people, a lot who say they want to be a YouTuber when they're older, and I had it a lot at the schools I talked at, the first question I go back to them is, a YouTuber doing what?
Yeah.
And then they go, I'm not sure. And I'm like, well, think about it, because celebrity traditionally was very much one pyramid, where you have A-list celebrities, everyone knew who they were. Whereas these days you could have celebrities on TV with millions of followers, and people go, I've never heard of them before, what are they doing on there? And it's because now the niches have become decentralized. You have niches of different sports and celebrities, you have niches of different music types.
And bigger platforms.
Much bigger platforms. And I think that has completely changed the dynamic. So the thing I say to young people now is, choose what you're interested in, because again, 10, 15 years down the line, you'll look back with much more fulfillment if you know that you've done something that you believe in.
Yeah, it's about following your path authentically from the heart, being genuinely bringing what you need to give. That's that thing, isn't it? If we recognize that each person has a gift within them, whatever that gift is, and it doesn't have to, we always get lost in thinking it has to be big and it has to be grand and it has to be on a massive scale. It doesn't. You can affect change just by sitting in the same room as somebody else, and that and that can be life-changing. It could be powerful. So it's just whatever you do, if it's cleaning the streets, if it's you're a doctor, you're a teacher, you're driving a bus, whatever it is, if you're bringing your kind of your heart to that, your sort of true self to that will impact people in a positive way, to such a degree. It's phenomenal. So yeah, it's always fascinating, isn't it? And when people say, this sort of this crave to be famous, or this desire to be, what on earth is it about? And having been famous or had that fame to whatever degree, it feels like a minor degree for me, but it still impacted my life massively. And I didn't actually really want it. It sort of always made me curious about, well, what is it people wanting? But I think it's that desire to find your place, a desire to to matter, to be seen, ultimately to be cared about. I think people sort of miss it. If you looked at it at its deeper layer, that sort of wanting of fame is really wanting to be accepted for who you are.
That's absolutely,
And, and if we can recognise that there are ways in which we can do that, and it actually comes back to the very beginning of our conversation, which is all about compassion for the self. If we can accept ourselves as who we really are, then we've sort of done that job.
Yeah, because when it comes to chasing views or even money in life, you can always have one more than what you currently have. And so if you start chasing that as the metric of success, you'll never be satisfied.
And it's out there. It doesn't exist. It's false. It's what's in here is what's alive, is what's real, it's what counts. But it's a process, and it's a process that you have to be brave and have a degree of self-awareness and a willingness to look in order to understand that. Otherwise, you are forced into that chasing the likes, chasing the attention, in order to feel what? Well, trying to feel good and accepting of yourself. Well, you could just cut the middleman out and go direct to yourself and work there first. And then everything outside of you changes anyway as a result of that.
This smoothly runs into the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, which, because you talked about sort of the social media aspect of likes and that. You've been involved as a TV presenter, you had a modelling career, you've been in reality...
Loosely call a modelling career.
Is that what you... Why would you say loosely?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't really call it modelling. Mind you. Yeah, no, I've just done... 22 years, I've done pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Every genre, I think, of TV there is. Yeah.
You've been Dancing on Ice.
Yeah, Fort Boyard.
Absolute classic show.
Yeah. Cowboy Builders... Everything, chat shows, game shows, reality shows.
You did, Celebrity Big Brother.
Yeah.
But what I was going to ask you about all that is, and I was going to touch upon in terms also like the modelling aspect as well, and you can define it how you wish. With social media now, and celebrity and privacy, and especially you having kids and how they navigate online and the pressures of having everyone can have a public life. I was just interested to know how you feel about those changes, because, and the reason I mentioned modelling is like anyone on Instagram now feels conscious about how they look on photos. I always, feel I don't take a lot of photos myself because I don't feel photogenic, and actually the psychology behind it's really interesting because it's all about familiarity, and it's why that when you see yourself in a mirror, you think you look better than on a photo because you see yourself in a mirror more times than in a photo. And so you're familiar with that appearance of you, and so that feels like normality. Whereas if you see yourself in a photo where it's now the other way around, it seems a bit odd. And that. But there's a lot of pressures online, and just so as a mother, but also as someone who's been in that sort of world.
It's fascinating. It is fascinating, and it does worry me, and it does concern me because, as you say, everybody can sort of have their own platform now. And not that there's anything wrong in having your own platform, but it's what is that about? What and how and who are you under it? I worry about people who are sort of still developing their sense of self and then having their sense of self sort of shaped and formed by what they're seeing in social media, where they think, they've got to have this amazing life. They've got to always have their legs up on the pool, right. Or, holding the sunset, or, out at this amazing party or with their big group of friends, or the latest this, that and the other, and looking incredible all of the time. And, that I worry that people start to feel that sort of distorted reality is normality, and it's not. And...
because you try and live up to that perception.
Or you measure your life against it and think, well, I'm just sat at home on the sofa, doing nothing in, pajamas with a bit of dried egg on, and, no plans for today. So was my life less than someone else's? And, and that's the problem that can happen, is that, that there's a lot of comparison and there's a lot of distortion. And I do talk to my kids about it a lot because it does worry me, and I think it can be unhealthy, and I think the way to address it is to keep having the conversation and really sort of try and see that is not a normal representation of anyone's life. It's, unless we don't post the pictures of ourselves looking terrible and that haven't gone through all the filters, and that
Yes.
are just dull and uninteresting because we think nobody will want to look. But it doesn't mean that there's not value in those moments. In fact, usually that's where the greatest value is in those moments.
But that even goes into the traditional press, because like the history of like Rupert Murdoch was the reason he set up those sort of celebrity pieces in newspapers was so that the average worker could see that celebrities were just human too. That's why they did the stories about people going through all these crises and sort of like building them up to break them down again. There's this whole psychology of just building people up, and then that comparison with when we are in moments of being vulnerable. And I think it's why we need to have those open conversations about the bad as much as the good.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and what we consider bad, that's where all the gold
bad is probably
is.
a terrible word, but yeah.
No, but it's where all the gold is. They are that's where
growth happens.
That's where growth happens. It's that's where people feel connected to each other. That's where things change. And it doesn't mean you can't have all the nice, stuff as well, but it's learning about what's real. And I think the major thing with social media is just, for everyone to have that full acknowledgement of not comparing themselves and understanding that it is distorted reality. It's not reality. And also just not forgetting to live, not forgetting just to live life for yourself, and that is more than enough. In fact, that's everything.
When you go to a music show, don't have to film it. You don't have to watch it with your own eyes, be in the moment. And that's where mindfulness comes down to.
Well, that's where you get to suck the juice of life, when you're there in the moment. You will get the goodness. We think if other people appreciate it, we're somehow getting it. But no, in that vicarious way, you don't. It might trickle through, but if you're there fully appreciating it, that's when you'll get the good stuff.
And I think that's going to be the counterbalance to the abundance of people posting online now, which is the value of a video going online is going to become less and less. So people are going to get to that point of, so I'm just going to live for the experience in the moment.
Saturation, it might just tip itself over under its own weight at some point, mightn't it?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what happens.
Melinda, I know you've got to go, but I just want to say a huge thanks for stopping by the studio, and this has been an amazing, fast-paced conversation. The time absolutely flies, and you have to come back on again sometime.
Yeah, would love to.
Thanks a lot.
Very much. Thank
Cheers.
you.